Excellent. Good morning. I'm going to open the public meeting for March 20th, 2018. To my left is John Christofferson, the Deputy County Attorney. To my far right is Jolene Sanchez, the Clerk to the Board. Assistant Clerk to the Board, would you mind calling the roll?
Commissioner Jackson? Here. Commissioner Holland?
Here.
Commissioner Sharp?
Here.
Commissioner Conti?
Good morning.
Good morning. And Commissioner Baker?
Here. Commissioner Jackson, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Certainly. Please join me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Christofferson, are there any modifications to the agenda this morning?
Yes, there's one modification. Item 6, Commissioner comments, should actually be item 7, and item 7, general business item, should be item 6.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Now's the time that we open for any public comment. If there are any... I would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So move.
Second.
And we have a motion to approve by Commissioner Sharp and a second from Commissioner Holland to adopt the agenda as amended. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, that motion passes unanimously. Now, citizen comment period. If there's anyone that has any thing they'd like to address to the Board of County Commissioners that does not pertain to any of the matters already on the agenda for today, please make yourself known to me. Raise your hand. Seeing none, the citizen comment period is closed. I would entertain a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Holland, seconded by Commissioner Conti. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, that motion passes unanimously. We're going to move to the general business items. First item on the agenda is item 7A, Public Hearing 2018 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan. Our presenter this morning is Linda Haley, and our county attorney is going to be Tiffany Blue. Ms. Blue, would you please set the foundation?
This hearing has been properly noticed and a public comment period was held for this item.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Ms. Haley.
Good morning. The purpose of this public hearing is to request approval from the Board of County Commissioners for our 2018 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan and to seek approval to submit the plan to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The plan was reviewed at a study session on February 5th, 2018. Since that time, we have held our 30-day public comment period and 2 public meetings. One was held here at Admin and one in Centennial. There were no public comments received from either the 30-day comment period or from the public meetings. Are there any questions? We reviewed the plan originally with you.
Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you. I appreciate all the effort that you and the committee put into working through these numbers and making the recommendations. As you noted in the BSR, the funding from the federal government has not come through and is unsure at this time. Can you tell us how, if the funding is not as you had hoped, or even is more, which is probably unlikely, how you will make those adjustments?
So what we will do is we do have some carryover funds that we believe would be sufficient to absorb what we would anticipate would be the differences. If, in fact, those were not and funding cuts were more severe, then we would go back through the applications and look at them based on scoring and the perceived community need and their match up with that need, and then we would come back before you with our recommendations if that were to change.
Any other questions for Linda? Seeing none, thank you very much. This is a public hearing, so we're going to up for public comments. Did we have anyone sign up to speak on this? No. Okay. Public hearing. Is there anyone that would like to address the Board of County Commissioners on this issue? Seeing none, public comment period is closed, and I would entertain a motion. Commissioner Sharp.
Mr. Chair, I would move to approve the 2018 one-year action plan, including the proposed community development block grant projects as presented on March 20th, 2018, and to authorize submittal of the 2018 one-year action plan to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Second.
Motion was made by Commissioner Sharp and seconded by Commissioner Jackson. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We're moving on to the next public hearing, which is case number U17006, Titan Solar Use by Special Review. The presenter is going to be Diane Kosis, Energy Specialist with Public Works and Development, and the attorney is Senior Assistant County Attorney Robert Hill. Mr. Hill, would you set the foundation for us, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This application for a use by special review for a solar power plant has been properly noticed by publication, by posting of the property, and by notice letter to the adjacent property owners. The board has jurisdiction to proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Kosis.
Good morning, Commissioners. This case is a full use by special review with 1041 requirements. This land development application is for a utility scale solar plant. The proposal is for a 50 megawatt facility on up to 760 acres. However, since the initial application, the project footprint has shrunk, and now the project footprint is approximately 520 acres. The applicant, Titan Solar LLC, and the property owner, Joseph Kalsovic, are requesting approval of this use by special review, which is located northeast and southeast of the intersections of County Road 18 and County Road 221. The entire project is zoned agricultural estate, and the nearest residence is approximately a half mile to the southwest. The current use of the land is dry land farming, although the project site has recently been fallow. The landowner and his sons are here today to speak, and we also have a representative from Colorado Parks and Wildlife, Brandon Moret, if you have any questions about the wildlife conditions of approval. Staff are recommending approval with 16 conditions of approval, and you'll have to excuse my hurried draft motion, which repeated the first and second conditions. The conditions were actually revised yesterday after incorporating 2 additional COAs that the applicant worked out with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Jess Moline, the applicant's representative for this project, will provide a summary of the project, and he and his team will be able to answer questions. Are there any questions before we proceed?
Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, thank you. At the last hearing of a solar farm like this, I did have questions about the wildlife, so I was really glad to see these additional conditions. Are we going to be supplied a map with those corridors and other features?
The applicant, in his PowerPoint, does have a map showing the corridor.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions for Diane before we have the applicant come forward? Thank you very much. Yes. If you would state your name and address for the record, please.
Good morning. My name is Jess Moline, doing business at 700 Universe Boulevard, Juno Beach, Florida, 33408. Morning, Chairman Baker and members of the Commission. It's a true pleasure to be back in Colorado. I actually went to school in Colorado Springs and have been in love with the state ever since. And judging from the construction around here, the secret is out. So I'd like to also thank the community of Deer Trail is well represented. You see the Kalsic family, you see the mayor, you see special thanks to Assembly Fickbaum for bringing out her FFA students, and I don't think it's ever too early to get involved in seeing how the government operates, and you'll see the future sitting right there in the back pew of the county. So I represent Titan Solar, and I'll explain the relationship between my parent company and that. But we are NextEra Energy Resources, and today we'd just like to talk a little bit about who we are as a company. You may or may not be familiar with the stuff that we've done out towards land. We've built quite a bit of wind in the state, which we'll review. Go over a little bit how we develop a project. I know solar is kind of a new and up-and-coming form of generation, and there's a lot that's not understood, so we'll kind of talk about how we as a company develop the project. We'll go through our permitting and construction plan, and there's specific questions that have come up throughout the last year as we've worked with Diane and her amazing team here in the county that we'd just like to address, and then we'd be happy to cover any questions that you may have for us. So again, we're NextEra Energy. The parent company is a publicly traded company with stock symbol of NEE. Below that, it's best to think geographically. There's two main companies. One is FPL, Florida Power and Light, and they're the regulated utility in Florida. And so that's kind of like Xcel Power here, Piesco. It's just the power company in Florida. My team and I work for NextEra Energy Resources. So FPL works pretty much exclusively inside the state of Florida, and we work outside of the state. So we're not publicly regulated, but we're a very large energy provider. Below NextEra Energy Resources is Titan Solar LLC, which is an indirect wholly owned subsidiary. We always set up a subsidiary company for each one of our projects so they can contain the assets, and it just makes the corporate finance and leverage financing a lot easier for us. So this is where we are in America. You can kind of see, it's a little hard to see the colors, but differentiated here in the center of the country where the good wind resources. We've built a lot of wind projects. California, a little bit of wind and quite a bit of solar. And then you can see as we're expanding across the Americas, you actually see some solar in the northern states, and it's starting to move out as the cost of solar comes down. It becomes more economical. So the growth of solar, there's a lot of reasons that solar is growing, but lately it's just pure economics. The solar power has become cheap enough for it to be a viable economic resource. Again, back to in Colorado, you see all of these projects. Everyone on this list except for Clear Spring Ranch is a wind project that we've built in the last 12, 15 years or so. So cumulatively, we've invested just under $3 billion in Colorado in renewable energy, with our most recent addition being Clear Spring Ranch, which is down in Colorado Springs. So we've been familiar with Colorado, and we've done a lot of business with Xcel and other partners here, and we really enjoy, and we hope to continue to build out more generation in the state. So how do we develop a project? I always like to talk about the three-legged stool of development: land, resource, and transmission. And so, obviously, land, you need a place you're going to build a generation site. You need land to build it on. And then resource, depending on what you're going to need. Going back, there's mine mouth coal. You might have heard of mine mouth coal. That when they built coal plants, you could either build it near the load, or you could build it near the mouth of the mine, which is a lot easier on transport, something like coal strip. It's the same kind of thing in renewables. You look at the actual resource, what's going to fuel your generation plant, and you try to find that good resource. So for a wind project, obviously you want good wind. For a solar project, you want a good solar resource. And then transmission. So that's really the driver. Honestly, America's full of land, and the sun shines pretty much anywhere, in one degree or another. But it comes down to transmission. That we are going to create a product. Our product is a megawatt hour of clean renewable energy, and that has to get to market. And the only avenue that we have to get that product to market is via the transmission corridor. So there's two ways to do it. You can build, sometimes you build out in a really good resource and you build transmission lines to a substation. Well, as you'll see in this case, we were fortunate enough to find an actual substation that had capacity so that we could build a generator right next to it and not have to build any additional transmission lines. The true key, though, and this is the secret of development, is you don't build a stool until you have someone to sit on it. So undoubtedly, as solar is becoming more economic and Xcel has announced a request for proposals for more energy, you're seeing a lot of proposals for many projects. We see that the same. It rolls out the same in every county in America, that at some point you hit this tipping point where there are a lot of projects that are introduced. Historically, the hit rate's been about 83% failure. So about 70% of the projects that actually come before a board such as yourself make it to fruition. And that's simply because of a contract. You really don't build a project or invest that kind of capital until you have someone to pay you for the power. So I'll go through a little bit through our project timeline. We started looking at the area back in 2011. And so we are a national company, as you saw on the map, and we like to have a pipeline of future projects. So we were actually, about 7 years ago, we realized that we plugged the Lyman wind farm into this substation, and we realized there's additional capacity. So we talked to Mr. Kalsovic, and we had got an option on his land in case something came along in the future. We signed that in 2012, initiated the interconnect request with the PSCO in 2014, and we signed an interconnect request in 2016. And that's simply a contract that says we're allowed to have a certain amount of capacity that's available in the substation and use that for delivery of our generation. The agreement was suspended in late 2016. We didn't have a power contract. And then it came out of suspension in 2018 because you can see on the fourth bullet there. We signed a PPA with Xcel for 20 years for all 50 megawatts of the project. And the key here is that it's the sole source of energy for the Renewable Connect program. And I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that, but it's a program from Xcel Energy. There's a lot of people who want clean renewable energy, and there's some customers of theirs who actually want 100% renewable energy. And it could be anywhere from a business who just wants to be more green to someone who lives in an apartment and says, I don't own a roof, I have nowhere to put solar, but I would love to be powered by solar. So they've come up with this Renewable Connect program, and they're going to have a generation project that's pure solar energy, and that will be provided to those customers who are willing to pay a little extra to have renewable energy. So if you get into the frequently asked questions on their website, they don't say the name Titan, but you can see it's 50 megawatt resource to be built in Deer Trail, Colorado. So it is this project, and it is public that we have signed the PPA with Xcel. So permitting construction overview. This is kind of the phases. August 2017 is when we really got serious. We submitted our application to Arapahoe County, and the steps we've gone through here. You can see we're here at the Board of County Commissioner hearings. Then obviously after this, we're close to signing an EPC contract. So that's hiring a firm who will actually do the construction and final engineering. The final engineering will be run through, all the appropriate divisions of the county. And they'll sign off, and we'll go back and forth a little bit on the actual final design. And then we plan on pulling building grading permits just before June, and then starting the construction in June. What's interesting is we'll be done in December. These plants go together very, very quickly, especially for a sizable power generation unit. 6-month construction is astounding. But it's a matter of the workforce. You hire quite a few people, and then you lay the panels, and it's pretty simple when it goes together. So we plan on being done, and we have a contract to deliver the power by the end of this year. So in all of our projects, we like to reach out to the local community, but then there's a lot of different agencies. So here's just a list of things we've talked with multiple different agencies in the area about. And when we found the project, we thought it was a good one, but you never know until you start asking. And so we reached out, and it turns out that this site, since it was in ag and has been fallow for a while and is right next to the substation, it actually turned out that there's a lot of good reasons for the project to be located in the place that it ended up being. One thing that we got, Mr. Kalsovic pointed us to a guy named Sammy, and we worked with him on the prairie seed mix. And this is something that, every time we build a project, we learn a little bit more on how to do it better. And so what we've learned is if you can get a native grass from, the local region that's a native grass, and find something that doesn't grow too tall, so it starts shading your panels, you don't have to mow it, that it's great for the project. And so, Mr. Kalsovic said that he knew a guy, so I told my boss that I needed to fly up to Colorado and talk to Sammy about some grass. Once I explained what that meant, he let me come out, and we got it put together. So we've actually drill seeded the site already. So the seed's in the ground there's a native shortgrass that'll start growing. It'll be there as a dust cover for construction, and then after we build the project, we'll cover the areas where we're disturbed, and you'll have a native shortgrass under the panels out there. So it should work out pretty well. So a quick overview on construction. Obviously, solar panels, they produce DC power. The sun shines on the panel. They'll produce a small amount of DC power. Depending on the panel, you see anywhere from 120 watts to up to 320 or 340 watts. they're arrayed in strings. One of the keys, and I'll talk a little bit later about why it's so important, but we're doing a single-axis tracking system, which means the panels will point east. The rows will be north and south, and the panels will point east in the morning, and then as the sun tracks across the sky east to west, the panels will follow them. It allows you to produce more energy with the same number of panels in a smaller footprint. So we'll be doing single-axis tracking. The power will be collected. These will all be tied together, and then they'll run underground to an inverter. The inverter will collect the DC power, and it will change it to AC power. So the grid runs on alternating current instead of direct current. And the inverters, it's pretty interesting to watch over the last few years. They're getting smaller and smaller. I inserted the word small here. I used to say how they're about the size of a shipping container. We just built a project in Arizona. I went out there and saw the new inverters, and I said, those are really tiny. They're a lot smaller than they used to be. So now it's a small shipping container, and they're getting smaller all the time. But the power will be collected from the strings. You'll see on our map, it's a big block that goes into an inverter. The inverter will output 34.5 kilovolt, so 34.5 kV AC power. That will be collected again underground in a larger cable to the project substation. Now, the project substation is going to be located immediately adjacent to the existing substation. And our interconnect agreement that we talked about before, we have a contract that we have to deliver that energy at 230 kV. So we have to match the grid voltage, and then we have to form and shape the power and qualify the power. So we can't be a problem on the system is what it comes down to. So our project substation is going to make sure that power matches exactly the grid voltage before it's delivered into the substation. So the final project layout, this is one in California that we built. This one, you'll see it's a pretty big square. We try to build, if you can, you build in a perfect square if it's possible. So you'll see on our map that we auctioned 760 acres. But there's some water features and some environmental features, and then as we talked to the community and various players in the area, we modified our design to try to fit everyone's needs. And so this one you'll see is not quite a square. So where's it located? You see Broadview here, Denver. Titan Solar is right out there by just north of Deer Trail. So quite a big, about 40 miles east. It's almost exactly 4 miles from Deer Trail to the border. You can see the red boundary there. So this is the entire 760 acres that we have the option to purchase, and it's adjacent to the Fiesco missile site substation. So when we originally started, we planned on covering the entire thing in panels, and then you start with a big array, and then you start finding out why you shouldn't build certain places, and then you change it. So it's 760 acres, about 520 acres will be used for installation. The solar panels, you can see the blocks I talked about. Each one of those will feed one inverter. So it's a little bit tough to change your array. You would think, the solar panels you see on someone's roof, it's the exact same solar panels we use. We use a lot more of them. The problem with an array of this size is that you block them together with an inverter. So you're playing Tetris with very large blocks. So a lot of people, when it comes down to design, say, well, you can just move this or shave a little bit off here, and it's not that easy. You can't remove a block without affecting all the other blocks. Site photos. This is what the site looks like. This is what it looks like in the summer. This is I think right around when we drill seeded it. So it's you can see a flat site, no large trees or anything that need to be removed for shading. And then you see this is on the county road looking across the grassland to the existing substation. So discussion topics, again, these are just things that came up around the last year that we just like to talk about, and then, again, we're happy to answer any questions. So proximity to neighbors is always a big issue when you're going to build a large array like this. We were fortunate in that the neighbors in this part of the county are not that close to this particular property. So our closest neighbor is actually 2,300 feet from the property. It'll be a little bit more once we put our infrastructure in and have a road, but it's essentially a little over 2,000 feet, and there's some topography, and we have some visual sims, but we'll show you from these houses you can't see the property at all. There's a little hill there, and so it's completely blocked. But a little side note, a little history on why Titan Solar. So I've circled here, there's 3 blast doors from the old Titan missile site. These are the missile silos out there, hence the name Missile Site Substation, and that's why we named it Titan. Kind of in a nod to the history of the area. The next closest neighbor to the northeast is 6,800 feet. I probably maybe could have done that in miles, so it's over a mile. So it's, again, really good distance, and you'll see in the visual sims that there'll be no visual impact to the neighbors. So we do photo simulations. Just to reiterate how those are done, you take an actual photo with a standard focal length on a camera, and then you go into the computer, and then you talk to our engineers. That's the critical step. Which panels are you going to use? What do they look like? How tall are they? How do they rotate? You take a lot of engineering data in, and the computer will actually take that data and photo render what it's going to look like. This is taken from the nearest neighbors. And again, as I mentioned, this is what it looks like now. And after we build it, there will be no change. The topography of the area just completely hides the project. PhotoSim 2, if you're coming down one of the major roads in the area, down Price Road, I think it is. Same thing. If you're looking towards the sub, you won't be able to see our project just because of the topography of the area. So this is where it got a little interesting for us. We got at the junction of Price Road and County Road 18 where you would actually turn in to drive in. Now the computer has better eyes. So I flew jets in the Air Force, so I think I had pretty good eyesight, but I couldn't see this. The computer told us you could see the panels, so there they are. We couldn't see them, so we did want to see do one photo simulation. At what point can you actually, no kidding, start to see the panels? And it came out right as you approach the entrance of the project, about 1,400 feet. This is what it looks like today. And after we construct you can see the panels sitting there. So all in all, we kind of got lucky with, the land adjacent to the substation had some topography, and it was just, the layout was such that there really not much of a visual impact. So we kind of got lucky on that. Wildlife corridors, something that came up. So this was the original plan for the fence. This is a thoroughfare here. So originally had, wildlife we knew we were going to pass through the area, so we have a 200-foot wide corridor. And then CPW requested an additional wildlife corridor and pointed out that it would be great if we could set aside this one. So we've talked to our engineers the last couple of weeks after the Planning Commission hearing, and so now we're proposing, fencing something akin to that. Again, we're not at final design yet, but it won't change much. But once final design is, we're instructing our engineers to make sure that the fence is aligned, tight to this side to leave that wash open. Right now it's bigger than 200 feet. I hate to say how big, my engineers will, right now it's showing over 300 feet, but again, that could collapse a little bit. Talking with Brandon and CPW and then doing some research on our own, we're wondering how wide does it need to be? A couple of things there's something we found in Arapahoe County Transportation Plan. Mentioned 10 feet high by 20 feet wide, so we were comfortable that we were well over that. But we guess that's probably a very specific location that has, other constraints that we don't. So we did find something else that talked about, Indiana Department of Natural Resources talked about, minimum 50 and maximum 200. So we're comfortable that our 200-foot corridor in two places should accommodate any wildlife moving through the area. Solar panel reflectivity, this comes up a lot. So I'll just preempt it by saying, I have seen photos, and there are some instances where, usually older generation panels, but they have a glass surface, and if they're at a fixed angle, as the sun comes up, it can create, reflection in the glare, and it can be nuisance glare. Those are, you only see that in fixed. We're building a tracking system, so the angle of incidence from our panel to the sun will always be 90 degrees. So the reflection will go right back up to the sun. So we don't expect any problems. But even with that, the technology is coming along. So again, at the end of the day, it's a business. And our business is turning photons into electricity to sell. And so, just in pure business economics and efficiency, you want to maximize that. So the manufacturers have realized that. So the modern panels are getting really good at capturing and absorbing as much sunlight as possible. Anything that is light that is reflected is lost profit. So all the modern panels are coated with non-reflective coatings. The tracking design is really what eliminates it. But as you can imagine, the FAA and pilots, were quite concerned about, glare. We're going to start seeing a lot of solar panels built. This is an actual chart from the chart from the FAA. There's two types of solar power here: concentrated solar power, really high reflectivity, because concentrated solar power is just a mirror. And so you have a bunch of mirrors that reflect as much light as possible onto a tower or a tube. It concentrates the heat. The heat goes through a heat exchanger, boils water, goes into a steam turbine, and creates power that way. So it's concentrated solar power technology that works. We built one 3 or 4 years ago. We think that's probably the last concentrated solar that'll ever be built in America. There's a lot of impacts to wildlife and stuff, and photovoltaics just works a lot better and is just a lot more efficient. So then on the other side of the scale, you see the photovoltaic reflectivity. It's below vegetation and bare soil. But the real key for me was in my travels, I'm starting to see these things crop up. So this is the Air Force Academy. This is their flight operations right on off of I-25 there. And you see they installed 14 megawatts. And I was mentioning this to one of my friends, and he said, well, that's nothing compared to Davis-Monthan. And so I went and looked. Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona is right here, and they installed a large array right next to the runway. Because of my background, I do a lot of interaction with the military for our company. And all the services, not just the Air Force, but all the services who have a flight component have gotten very comfortable with solar panels and the reflectivity, and basically the lack of reflectivity on their flight surfaces. A few financials, construction, again, so we don't provide a lot of permanent jobs. That's maybe a downside of solar. There's a lot of construction jobs. We expect about 5 permanent jobs. We say 3 direct and 2 indirect. And there's a national database where you put in all the information about your project, and it kicks out these numbers. I think INRO put it together. And so what 3 direct and 2 indirect means is we'll probably hire about 3 direct people. People will have NextEra Energy. They'll be employees of ours, and they'll operate the plant. And inevitably they'll get paid. They'll spend some money in the local economy. And due to the increase of the expenditure in the local economy, the model said 2 indirect jobs will be created. So not a lot of permanent jobs. They are good construction jobs. And it's funny because I talked to a couple of folks that were building for us down in Arizona, and I asked them about that because that always comes up. Well, what good is a construction job that goes away? And I said, so what are you going to do after this job? And the entire group I was talking to said, are you kidding me? We've got projects lined up across the country as long as we can see. Like they go job to job. So they don't feel like it's a temporary job. It is one that moves around a lot. But there's a lot of, if you can build solar, there's a lot of jobs out there for you today. Capital investment, about $60 million total CapEx for us. Obviously there'll be building permit fees come to the county. The real increase for the county is the tax increases. Obviously the value of the property goes up. And so there'll be a lot higher property tax. And then the big thing is no increase in services. They're an unmanned site. We don't expect to be a burden on any of the social services provided by the county. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from this committee? Commissioner Conti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You went to great degree to explain to us how the solar panels create energy in DC power, and then an inverter on site the size of a small shipping container converts that to AC, so that you can then and then what you have to go through to put it on the grid in order to sell it to Xcel. Could you share with us what is the average price that Xcel is buying it for?
I'm trying to think if they've made it public. I'm not allowed to disclose it. Do you remember? Is it public? It's not public, but I'm happy to tell you it's below $40 a megawatt hour. So it's a very, very good price.
Other questions?
Thank you.
Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you. In this lovely reading material you provided for us, there was discussion of a house that's on site and pictures of that little house. I was just wondering, does it have any, I don't recall that it had any historic value or anything. What are you going to do with that? Are you going to just let it decompose, or what? I was just curious.
No, absolutely. So there's a couple, we buy sites like this, it's pretty common to have a house on site. And usually that's left up to our operations. So I'm development, we develop the project, and then I'll monitor it through construction, and then it gets turned over to an operations team. And, almost always one of two things happens. If the house is in a state of repair that it just doesn't make sense to use it, then it'll be deconstructed and the materials will be recycled and disposed of. But if it's in a place where we can, put a little bit of money into it and use it for our technicians. So technicians from the plan right now is most likely we'll hire some new technicians that'll work alongside of our Lyman wind farm technicians. And so if you go, this site won't be manned 24/7, but a couple of times a week technicians will come out to the site to do maintenance. And so if the house is in, such a state that we could put some money into it and that's a place for them to, set their laptop and have a bathroom, it's up to operation. So it'll either be repaired or disposed of.
Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you. And just to be clear, I think I know the answer, but I want to just make sure that I'm correct. There are no chemical agents used in the construction or the running of these solar panels. It's purely physical components and then electrical components. Is that correct?
Correct. So it's a standard construction site. You will have chemicals in the forms of fuels and oils and lubricants in the construction equipment. But after that, no, there are no. There's not a gearbox. There's no oil. And in fact, one thing we commonly ask is how do you wash the panels? And the answer that we found, we've installed billions of dollars worth of solar over the last 10 years. And the answer we found is Mother Nature does a phenomenal job of washing the panels. But one time we do have a plan to wash panels, and if we do, it's deionized water. And so you take filtered deionized water. You want pure H2O because, you clean the panel using just deionized water, no chemical agents or soaps, because once it evaporates, you don't want anything left behind. Any film on your panel, again, it comes back to the economics. You don't want to use a soap, leave a film, and decrease your production. So I would say the chances are very, very slim we'd ever wash this site. If we do, it'll be pure deionized water.
Any other questions? Commissioner Sharp.
Thank you. I just have a couple questions. You said the 70% success ratio, and that's to get to the completion of a project. Can you talk about how that relates to this particular project and where you are? I imagine that's in the process. So in our process, or where you are with us right now, how does that, do you think that 70% is, you're greater than 70% at this point?
Yes, Commissioner, we're at 99%.
Okay.
Yeah, but we have a PPA power purchase agreement with Xcel Energy. So they've contracted to purchase this power for 20 years.
Okay.
At a set rate. And so that's when a project becomes real. You'll have a lot of people go out, you'll option the land, you'll do some environmental studies, you'll do an interconnect request. And that's kind of the base level. You see a lot of projects start that, and they talk to the county about it. And then you say, okay, we can or can't connect to the grid here. We have a good idea whether or not we can build on this site. At that point, most companies stop spending money because until you have a site on income, you don't want your expenditures to grow. So I can go back to our timeline here, and it's the same process that almost every company uses, and we went through the same thing. So back in 2011 is when we optioned the land. And the key here is we signed an interconnect request and actually had rights to deliver energy, and we suspended it. And so we kind of put the project on hold and said, okay, this is as much money as we want to spend on the project until we get a contract. And then the key was, you'll see how it lines up. In June of 2017, we signed that contract. And then not surprisingly, a couple months later, we're in the county saying, hey, the project has just become real. And we have a contract, so now we go forward. And so this project will happen. We amended the interconnect request, and we will go forward. So at this point, we're contracted to deliver by the end of the year. So, I've been taught not to say 100%, ma'am, so 99%.
Right, 99. That'll do. Close enough. So my two other questions, are there any drainage basin issues? I know on the map it showed some drainage ways and that kind of thing. Is there any of that would impact this development?
There are, and I could bring more expertise up and they could get a lot deeper into it. But essentially that was how, when we first looked at the project, we looked at covering all of it in in panels. And then there's a water feature here, a drainage here, or Brandon had the fancier CPW ephemeral drainage or something very technical, much smarter words than I had for that. There's some water features up here. So those were all avoided in the design. And I think Brandon could probably talk more about some of the things we've done, but water features are important, and we don't want to, for a couple of reasons. One, they're less stability. You don't want to install panels where there's possible erosion.
You want to make sure you have adequate drainage through the whole area.
Absolutely. And then so we do a hydrology study, make sure we know which way the flows. We have Dwayne McLeod here, one of our principal engineers, could talk about the flows, but we look at the flows, retention basins, and all that stuff. It's critical to the project.
Okay. And my final question is, in again, reading this, and I can't say that I got through the whole thing, but let's see, attachment D, the last item, it says, NextEra explained that their application will be a two-step process. The application will be general, and then more specific additions will be provided as there will be thousands of changes to the plans. So planning explained that the production plan has historically been general in nature. So my question is, if there are thousands of changes, that worried me, thousands, but how confident are you of this design and the things and the changes? Are they going to be minor, or just kind of explain that?
Absolutely.
That item for me.
So I totally understand where you're coming from. So I'd say of 1,000 changes, we're probably through 900 of them. Over the last year, we started with this entire thing covered in panels and have moved and switched and changed. And as we talked to CPW, we changed some other things. In fact, 2 weeks ago, they said, hey, we would sure like your fence to change. So we're constantly changing. I'm going to throw a number out. I'm going to look back at Dwayne and see if he agrees. 90%? Yeah. This is 90%. So we're very close. So our EPC contract at this point will take essentially this, and very few from a macro level, very few changes that you would actually see. There might be some cable diameter changes or something like that.
Okay.
And so the second phase of the process after this is we get the final, they call them IFC, issued for construction, the no kidding engineering drawings that will be used to construct it, and those are run through the county. The county engineers have to approve everything, the size of the wire, everything that we're going to use. So. Visually speaking, 90 to 95%, you're not going to see really any changes from what you see today.
I apologize. I do have a couple more questions. As long as, if you could address any comments you've had from the neighbors, and with respect to this project, you did answer the reflectivity, which is a question that I had for neighbors and that kind of thing. So you answered that question. For me. So in terms of feedback from neighbors on this project, and then I just thought of one other one, which is the setback. What's the setback from the roads for the panels? I know I could look on here, but
Chris, 25 feet from this road. Okay.
Okay.
As far as the neighbors, let me go back to, let's see, where was it?
That doesn't seem like, 25 feet doesn't seem like, that's to the edge of a panel?
We could get back to that, but it's whatever the county standard is for setback it would be to the actual infrastructure, yes.
Yeah, not necessarily to the property line, but to the equipment, to the panels themselves. It looks like more than that.
So maybe
we can
from our fence to the panels?
Yeah, I'm thinking like from the edge of the roadway to where you actually have a panel. I suspect it's more than 25 feet. Yeah,
Well, we're going to build internal roadways that'll be very close to the panels. But are you asking about publicly accessible external roadways?
Yeah, like if the public roadway is here, and then you get to. Not just the property line, because if the fence is not going to necessarily be on the property line.
That's correct.
The fence is going to be around the
panels. Two public roads right here, and so that's that's going to be hundreds of feet. And to be honest, if you go out there today, the road essentially ends here. Now, we are working with the county. We're going to make sure that the county preserves right-of-way along that.
Yes.
But as you can see, it's a 200-foot wide corridor. So I would assume we're centered on that. The road's probably 50 feet. So
okay, it's hard to tell from here, but that
not good map for scale. So
well, and their wildlife corridor didn't look like 200 or 300 feet to me, but
yeah, this is very zoomed out.
That's because it's so small. Yeah,
you're looking at 760 acres there.
Exactly. So that answers my question.
Okay.
I just didn't. The concern was that it was going to be too close to that. Ultimately, if there's a road that continues on through there, that'd be too close. But I think 200 feet is probably adequate. So, okay, so back to this.
The neighbors. Let me talk about.
Yeah.
So here you can kind of see some houses. I think there's this house here, and there's another one over here. So one of the very first things after we got the PPA got turned over to my team, I took a few members here and we came out to Colorado and we put together a flyer of what the project is, and we actually went and knocked on the doors of the neighbors. And they were all very receptive. It was a little hard because they asked, hey, where's it going to be built? And we took them out on their porch and kind of showed them. And they said, well, we can't see the substation from here. I said, well, there'll be. And so we explained it to them. We showed them on the map. They were all very receptive, very positive. There was one who was quite negative at the start, and he tried to throw us off the property, got very irate. And I said, hey, I'm sorry. I handed him the thing. He looked at it for a second and goes, I'm sorry. I thought you were the Mormons. So once he understood we weren't there for religious purposes, which was funny because I am Mormon. But once he understood what we were there for, he was very receptive. We've tried to make contact again, but there's been very little interest. We can't see it. The one neighbor we have had discussions with is up to the northeast. Mm-hmm. So this is Hank Farms, and they told us that there's right here in you get the monsoon season in the summer, that the water runs down this drainage, and it has affected their fence in the past.
Yeah.
And so we've made a few phone calls to try to stay in touch with them. The next step on that, and I was talking to Alcy, is to make sure that when once we get an engineer on board, we like to get the actual engineers in the field with them to kind of describe what happens, and then ideally this summer, if it does happen, we can see what's happening there, and then we can engineer a solution. I'm not an engineer I'm not sure what the best solution would be there. I'm sure there's something we could do to help them. But their only concern was that if they were under the impression we were going to grade the entire site, and there was going to be a ton of runoff. There was going to be more runoff than historically. So we've mitigated that as much as possible with the short grass planting. What will happen here, I'm not sure, but we have committed to having our engineers in the field with them and see if there's anything that we can do to mitigate their fences being damaged by the spring runoffs.
So how much in terms, and I probably used the wrong word, neighbors necessarily, but adjacent property owners, because it looks like some of these properties don't have a residence on them. So have any of those adjacent property owners had any concerns or?
No. So we had an open house, and we had Mr. Price and a lot of the neighbors, all the surrounding areas. We sent it out, to everyone, and they came to Deer Trail. We had an open house and answered their questions. Most of the questions were along the lines of, "Hey, can you buy my property for sale?" So, but we answered all the questions. There's been, it's been an absolute pleasure working and getting to know the neighbors and the city of Deer Trail. And again, I'm not going to say we're that good or that smart. The siting of this project was, the substation was a spot where if you put a solar plant next to it, it's very unobtrusive. So we kind of got lucky there.
And that drainage area was the one that I was kind of looking at, but you don't have any development in that corner. You don't, as far as I looked, you don't have any panels in that.
That's right. This is one of the drainages
corner.
we avoided. That was one of the water features we did avoid.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Holden.
Just a cautionary note, don't fly your drones in Deer Trail. They have hunting license for them.
Duly noted.
Yeah, I have been a strong fan for years of solar energy, and having worked in the development of SERI, which now is NREL, I was there at the opening, and the question I have is two questions. One, in the evolution of the development of solar energy and its improvements and economic viability, it's been a tremendous development of a field that has grown exponentially over the last 10 years, and that's due to cost and research. And NREL played a significant role in developing the science to move forward in cooperative efforts with industry. Can you tell me, and I'm sure that your company has looked at this, the difference in costs of developing kilowatt hours or kilowatt power versus the traditional coal and natural gas plants?
Absolutely, Commissioner Holland. So, the kind of going back to where you did the start of solar was a new technology, kind of a GWIS technology. NASA, the feds are really who pushed it forward, got it to where it's, it wasn't commercially viable, it was viable, actually produced power. And then for the last 10 years or so, it's been RPS driven mostly. Renewable Portfolio Standard, Clean Power Plan, things of that nature. California, for lack of a better term, has pushed it. We're willing to spend a lot of money to install solar power. And so once someone like that steps up and says, we're willing to spend a lot of money, you get through version 1.0, more factories get built, there's more production, so the price comes down. Once the price comes down from, let's say, $10 a watt, it's measured in how many, dollars per watt installed. Once it was $10 a watt, which is pretty expensive, really expensive, and you're selling, coal, to give you a reference point, coal and gas are selling at $30 or $40 a megawatt hour, and you're selling at $300. But once the first, version 1.0 gets through and it gets a little bit more efficient, now you're at $8 a watt. And so you get a few more adopters. But you see the real, decrease in the cost curve came, 5 years ago. California started installing it, but it's a global thing. So once India, China, the Middle East started really heavily investing in solar and adopting solar, again, more factories popped up. They got more efficient because there's competition in the manufacturing, which really drove the price. One of the biggest problems our companies had is we didn't properly forecast how fast it got cheap, because we said, well, it's going to be up here. We had a cost curve and it was always lower than that. And so we're interesting you bring this up, Commissioner Holland, because last week I spent a couple of days in a conference with our company and some of the thought leaders in the area, and we're in a transition period, and you're kind of seeing it in Colorado. We're going from we want to be green to we want renewable energy that's affordable. And so what's interesting right now is you have there's coal still around $35 to $40 a megawatt hour. You have gas, which obviously can go up or down. It's cheap, and I think all the views are it'll be cheap for quite a while. But even new gas is $30, $35 a megawatt hour. And now you have wind, which is selling at or below $20 a megawatt hour. And you have solar. Again, ours was under 40, and they have a round of bids that we'll see when they come out, but we expect that to be under 30. So it comes down to economics. Do you want power? Yes, I do. What do you want to pay for it? Do you want to pay 20, 30, or 40? And another way to say that is, do you want solar and wind or gas or coal? And so the industry is in a transition period, which is only going to, cause more efficiencies and, more manufacturing, which is going to drive the prices down. So we're in I'd say this is the pivot point right now, and you're seeing it in Colorado. The prices have gotten really low. There's a tariff. There's, the renewable standards are changing, and you also have the production tax credits and the installation tax credits are phasing out. So over the next few years, the goal of the industry is to build new generation, and it's not for necessarily green purposes, although it is green energy. It's fossil replacement.
Right. And if I could just add, Mr. Chairman, I think that the clear evidence is that amongst scientists who claim, and I know it's in dispute, about global warming, is that moving towards solar, as long as it's competitive, seems like the wise choice.
Absolutely. And I think you hear a lot of visions of the future. I think you'll see a lot of wind, a lot of solar, and a lot of new natural gas, because at the end of the day, the wind doesn't blow all the time and the sun does go down. So,
Commissioner Sharp.
Right.
Yeah, you just made my point that the wind doesn't blow all the time. The sun doesn't shine all the time, but we need electricity all the time. So I think it's not one or the other. It has to be a combination. So of multiple sources, some that provide reliability all the time and some that we can use when they're available. And so that was the only, wind and solar are not going to be 100% of the portfolio ever.
I couldn't agree more. We're not a renewable company.
They're going to be a growing part, but they're never going to be 100% unless we can figure out a way to store that energy that then can be used at times where the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing. And I believe in technology. I think that who knows where we will be even 10 years from now on energy and the ability to store it. So, I just think that right now we have to make sure we have energy 100% of the time and getting from sources that we can use. So, just a comment.
Absolutely right, Commissioner Sharp. We're known as a renewable company. NextEra Energy is one of the largest consumers of natural gas in the nation, as we own a lot of gas plants as well. It's a mix, right? The answer, usually it's like your personal finances. What does your advisor say? A portfolio. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Same thing with energy. Absolutely correct.
I'm going to ask some questions now, if that's okay. I usually try to give the other commissioners first shot because a lot of times my questions get answered, but I'm going to chime in here as well. The current substation is called the Missile Site Substation, and that is operated by Xcel Energy. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's technically PSCO, which is a subsidiary.
Okay.
Public Service Company of Colorado.
And you said something about a new substation being built, or are you going to solely use the Missile Site Substation?
So it's the same word, so Chairman Baker, it can get confusing. The PSCO substation is existing. Mm-hmm. We're going to build what we call the project substation. And let me get back to a picture of what that looks like. It's technically a substation, but it's you can see there the size of the existing substation. Ours is very small compared to that. That's ours. It's very, very small, and it's some poles around what's called a GSU, a generator step up. So it's a transformer, and that's what changes the power from 34.5 to 230. So we are building a new substation, but about the size of the dice. It's
exactly
pretty small.
So, and the reason for that is the existing substation, basically the power being generated by the Titan solar field will need an additional small addition to this substation.
That's absolutely right. When we cross the fence into their sub, the contract says we have to be at 230 kV.
Got it.
And the only way to get there is to step it up at the GSU.
Okay. The next question I have is about the fencing. I know you've made some changes since what we got in our reading as far as the animal corridors, and I want to just say thank you for doing that. I noticed that in the conditions, the fencing is very specific about what can be used in order to prevent wildlife from getting hung up on the fence. And I remember in the last solar project that we looked at, because there's going to be gates, and the gates will be open at certain times when staff are out there and wildlife could get in. Have you considered ramps on the inside of the fencing to allow wildlife to get out once the fence is closed?
Chairman, I don't think we've looked at ramps. So the fencing that we proposed was our standard fence, which is a 6-foot fence with another foot of 3-strand barbed wire. And we had many consultations with CPW and others that said, okay, well, first of all, to avoid entrapment, it's really great if you can take that center wire out. If you only have 2 wires and there's more space. So we did that. And then just a couple of weeks ago, Brandon informed us, hey, it's even better that top strand. If it's smooth and not barbed, it's better. So we made those changes. we actually see very few, large animals ever come into our solar facilities. There's not much in there for them. They don't see a source of food or anything. So if they are, we ever do have that scenario, the technicians, they open the gate and, while they're there, see if the animal will flush out, and if not, then they'll contact wildlife management. But it's a problem that really doesn't occur much. You'll see one of the conditions. The other thing is, any species that we find inside the area, if we find even a carcass of, a bird or something, then we'll write that down, monitor it, report it. Again, this is, we're hoping this isn't our last project, so we're always trying to get smarter about it. Hey, well, how can we be better at the next installation?
Okay. Another fence question. The animals that are in that area, we're talking mainly deer and antelope. And at one point we had talked, and there's different reasons for doing panels in the fence. I mean, woven through the fence to make it opaque rather than semi-transparent of chain link, in order to make sure the animals see the fence and don't run into it, kind of thing. There's also the reason for a lot of neighbors not wanting to, they'd rather look at the fence than at the panels behind the fence. I don't think that's the issue in this particular part of Arapahoe County, but was there any discussion with wildlife about anything to kind of highlight the fence for the wildlife?
Not necessarily highlighting. We did talk about slats, because we do slats if we're closer to residences for the visual obstruction. Right. But then you get into, depending on the part of the world, dust or snow accumulation or tumbleweed accumulation. So here we're proposing bare chain link fence, and that was in consultation with Parks and Wildlife. But we'd be happy to hear if Brandon, I think he's going to speak. If there's,
we're going to ask him to come up.
Hanging him out there with symbols or something, I'm not sure, but I'm sure there are techniques. I mean, I grew up in a ranching family in Montana. It took us 4 years to keep the deer out of the garden. So.
And I just wanted to confirm the drainages are Cabin Gulch and Bolden Gulch. Is that correct? Up there in the northwest corner, I believe that's the name of them, and maybe that would be a question we ask Mr. Kalsavec.
Yeah,
but
that sounds right. Anybody have?
Okay. Okay, we'll ask you to come up in a minute, Mr. Kalsavec. But I think next, unless there are any other questions, Commissioner Sharp.
I have one more question. So 50 megawatts will provide energy to, sometimes we always talk about it in terms of homes, but what does that provide? Or however you would like to.
You see lots of numbers. I think Excel had, where was my slide on Excel?
I was looking through here because I thought I saw it.
I think they had a number. Here, we'll lean on theirs. It says enough to power 17,000 homes.
17,000. Okay.
So it's again, it comes down to consumption. What is the consumption of a home, which we see, that number is rising. The homes that are being built today, LED lighting, more efficient in all ways. So.
Yes. It's a good thing. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Allen?
I will leave what I think is probably the map up in case any other future speakers want to use that with the new fencing plan.
And Brandon Moret, correct? If you could come forward, please. State your name and address for the record.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Brandon Moret. I am Colorado Parks and Wildlife's Northeast Region Energy Liaison, and I'm located at the Denver office at 6060 Broadway in Denver, 80216. So I have a couple prepared comments wanted, then I'll answer any questions. I'm here in place of your local wildlife officer, Travis Harris, who unfortunately couldn't be here. He had a pressing matter this morning, but he does send his greetings. In any event, we appreciate the continued collaboration with NextEra throughout this process, who have made modifications to their plan to limit their impact to wildlife species to the extent practicable. With the additions of the two new conditions of approval, the mortality monitoring for 3 years and the wider wildlife corridor for more than 200 feet, Colorado Parks and Wildlife has no further concerns as this application moves forward for approval. Also, we appreciate the county's diligence. We're learning just like you guys are with these solar facilities. and foresight in protecting these plains wildlife species. You mentioned the pronghorn earlier, for current and future generations to enjoy and hunt. And that's basically all I had for prepared remarks. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Questions for Brandon? I think we're good.
Great. Thank you for your time, Commissioners.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Kalsavec? He's the current owner of the property. I just wanted to note that I believe County Road 18, which runs through the property there, is also known as Kalsavec Road, if I'm not mistaken.
Because my father and my uncles all part of
Would you mind coming forward and just so that you're captured on the microphone, and we're live streaming as well, so we have an audience that way they can all hear you. And I think this is fascinating to hear a little bit of history about the road. So if you would, just state your name and address for the record.
My name's Joseph Kelsovic, and I live at P.O. Box 816 Byers, or that's my post box. But my family's farmed this place since we bought it in 1950. I was only a year old then, so I don't really recall the deal. But and we farmed it ever since. And the road that you were asking about is originally Richard Price, that's just to the west, and Richard has the ground to the north side of that road, but the original road came straight out of Deer Trail along the west side of this. I think it's still a 50-foot easement or a 60-foot easement that came straight out of Deer Trail. And my father and my uncles, when we farmed in Westminster, and they'd drive out there and stay there at the old house and dryland farm that. And so they built that road with plows and a couple old tractors, and that's what Dick gave him Mr. Price gave him let him build it, and it knocked a whole bunch of trouble off. That's why that road's called Kalsovic Road.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Kalsovic? Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Kalsovic. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. So the house that's on the property that I asked about earlier, was that a place that was lived in by your family, or does it have any historic meaning to you?
I wouldn't say it has any historical value. It's an old house, and we fixtured up. It used to be thousands of millers in it when we stayed there, and we'd go out and stay during the week because we didn't have to drive so far. But I put tin on it and tinned the roof to make it a little warmer, and it's an old farmhouse, but it's pretty well. The mice have just about taken it over. So
of mice and millers, huh?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
We got plenty of them there.
Commissioner Conti.
Just wanted you to say at my house it's the rabbits and the mice. So yes, we have lots of things in common, even here in the metropolitan area.
I understand.
Well, I just want to say thank you for all of the family history that you've told us about, and the fact that this has been farmed for so long in your family, and this is a milestone for you and your family. So
we still farm a little in Arapahoe County, and it'll help us out keep doing it because there isn't a whole lot of money in farming right now. But so we'll pay a lot of bills, and it'll help us.
We heard the same thing from the last solar development that we had as well, and that was a lease. This is a purchase, and we understand that.
Yes, sir.
But the family that was leasing the land was planning to use the proceeds from that lease to buy additional land to farm. So,
and next year they're way ahead. They don't say much, and you don't realize they are. But I mean, they've been talking to us on this place since 2007, and it's pretty amazing. You see it in the last go round because they didn't know if they could do it, but they took the options with us and they kept it up. But from what I've seen, I know we don't have any wind deals with them, but they checked us out for wind and put towers on us, and they've always kept their word up, and they've been really decent to work with. Okay.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Commissioner Conti.
Yes. Also, just wondering, how many acres will you have remaining in Arapahoe County that you will continue to farm?
Oh, 10,000.
Just a few.
Just a few. Okay.
Pardon me?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Go. That's fine. Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Yes, Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you. We really haven't talked about wear and tear on the roads. I wonder if we could hear from staff about road impacts.
Ann, would you come? Chuck Haskins from engineering. That was one of my questions too about the rural road impact fees.
Good morning, Commissioners. Chuck Haskins, Engineering Services Division. This type of use does not, the rural transportation fee does not apply to this type of use. We don't anticipate any real traffic issues with the ongoing operations. We're unsure about the construction, so we'll work with the applicant. We'll do a pre-inventory of the road condition, and we'll monitor that throughout the process, and we'll enter into a road maintenance agreement. So they'll be responsible for any maintenance during construction as well as any damage to the road. This is pretty new to us, so we're not exactly sure if that's going to be an issue or not. We also worked with NextEra when they did their transmission line, so we had good results from that as well.
Additional questions for Mr. Haskins?
Thank you.
Any other questions, discussion among commissioners? I'm going to open up for public comment. I'll open up public comment period. I did have 4 entities sign up to speak, and we've actually heard from 3 of those 4 already. The Colorado Parks and Wildlife signed up to speak and checked the 4 box. So you mentioned that when you were up testifying that you're in favor of this. You have no further objections. I'm sorry. I guess that was just Lynn. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Brandon. You just spoke. So and Mr. Kalsavec signed up to speak in favor. The Deer Trail FFA, if you have a representative that would like to address the board on this issue. Sure. Now what we do is there is a 3-minute limit. So you'll have to watch, and if you'll give us your name and address for the record, and then watch the lights up here. When you have 30 seconds left, the yellow light will come on, and then when time's up, the red light will come on.
So I'm Emily Fickbaum. I'm the Deer Trail FFA advisor at Deer Trail Schools. Address is 350 2nd Avenue, Deer Trail, Colorado. And we just wanted to kind of talk a little bit in support of the program and of the solar panels. The students are going to talk a little bit about, but it's provided us with some educational opportunities. The students live in the district. Some live fairly close. They hunt pronghorn out there, and so they're directly impacted. And so I'm just going to let them kind of give their quick viewpoints. And
thank you.
Thank you.
First of all, we would like to thank.
Can you give us your name and address?
Erica Cowell. 87606 East County Road 42.
Thank you.
First of all, we wanted to thank NextEra for giving us this opportunity. We really got it gave our community development opportunities that were very appreciated, and also educational opportunities in the school, like learning about what the natural resources are improving.
Thank you.
My name is Emily Thame. My address is 55777 East 41st Avenue. Oh, yeah, I'm pretty short. Sorry. Strasburg, Colorado. We would just like to thank NextEra because not only did they meet with the community, but Jeff actually came and met with the students and me also and asked us what we wanted to see done, and they offered us a field trip after it was built to see how it works and to advocate our learning about renewable resources. So thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your comments. Commissioner Holland, I think he may have a question for you.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge your involvement in these type of environmentally alternative energy programs, and your presence here is very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Those were all the people that signed up ahead of time, but I would like to offer an opportunity for any citizen to come forward and address this issue. If you believe you have information to board, please come forward. And again, the rule is you have 3 minutes, and name and address.
My name is Larry Kelsvik. I live at 529 South Fetzer Street in Byers. I farm and ranch with my dad there on the property and have for my whole life. And I guess the only little tidbit of information I thought I could provide was just, what I've seen hunting the animals, because I've grown up being an outdoorsman. My degree's from Colorado State in fish, wildlife, and conservation biology. It's a bachelor, but just what I have seen as far as the animals, I wouldn't be concerned about them getting trapped in an open gate scenario, just because the animal that I've seen do that more than anything is cattle. They'll wait for us to open that gate and run for it. But I do believe the wildlife, they're pretty leery, and they do most of their moving at night when the gates would be closed. So I think I told in the first meeting that I thought the corridors would be effective, and that's really and as far as the visibility of the fence to the wildlife, I do believe with the smooth wire electric fence and barbed wire, you can see that they do have a little more of an issue in a smooth single strand of electric wire, but as far as the fences that they're going to be putting up, I think that they won't have any issues.
Thank you very much. Questions? Seeing none, any other citizen comment at this time? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and ask for any further discussion or questions. Commissioner Jackson. Oh, please, forward.
It doesn't close questions, right?
No, it doesn't.
So, yeah, I am happy to make a motion. I'm really pleased to see the kids in FAA and that you're active and that you're caring and thinking about the future and the health of your community. And I don't know what else to say. This is a large project, and it's not the largest in the state, but it's the largest one we have. And so it does require a thoughtful process, and I think we've all kind of studied the background material and appreciate the hard work and the years that have gone into the development of this project. So, therefore, in the case of U17-006, Titan Solar Use by Special Review, I have read the staff report, including all exhibits and attachments, and have listened to the applicant's presentation and any public comment as presented at the hearing, and hereby move to approve this application based on the findings in the staff report, subject to the following conditions. And bear with me because there are several. The applicant shall address to Public Works and Development to their satisfaction all PWD comments prior to the signing of the USR Mylar. Signature of the Mylar is required prior to the issuance of permits for site disturbance and construction unless evidence is submitted that required wildlife surveys have been conducted in accordance with the conditions of approval. 2. The applicant shall address to Public Works and Development satisfaction.
I just want to, both 1 and 2 are exactly the same, so you can skip.
They are.
Yes.
Thank you. You didn't want to hear me read that twice? It was so good that I wanted to. Oh, okay. Number 2. And so I'll try and remember the correct numbering. Number 2, the applicant shall address all engineering service division comments and concerns, including, but not limited to, GESC, ROW right-of-way, and street cut permits a gravel roadway agreement, and so on, as identified in the reports prior to the start of construction. Number 3, the applicant will need to remove or provide for the removal of the solar power plant if and when the solar power plant is no longer functional or operations are discontinued for a period of 1 year. And the applicant shall provide the county with a guarantee for decommissioning the site prior to the project becoming operational. Such guarantee shall be in the form of a performance and payment bond payable to Arapahoe County and effective through the duration of the project, or provide some other guarantee of removal of the equipment that is acceptable to the Planning Division Manager. Number 4, the applicant will restore the surface after removal of the solar power plant, or will restore the surface of any portion of the acreage taken out of solar production during the life of the solar plant, to include filling holes that result from post-removal and restoring native grasses to the satisfaction of the Planning Division. Number 5, the applicant must obtain a will serve letter from Deer Trail Fire Protection District and comply with the district's requirements for the life of the project until the site is decommissioned. Number 6, the applicant must comply with the approved noxious weed management plan submitted August 22, 2017, and approved by the county weed control specialist on September 15, 2017, or as subsequently amended with the approval of the county weed control specialist. 7, the applicant must conduct surveys for the swift foxes and prairie dogs, provide survey results to Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and implement Colorado Parks and Wildlife recommendations for these species if present. Number 8, the applicant must conduct a nesting bird survey no more than 2 weeks prior to initial site disturbance. If an active songbird or raptor, such as burrowing owl, northern harrier, or pharyngeus hawk nest is observed, then the applicant must contact Colorado Parks and Wildlife and maintain appropriate CPW buffer for any of the observed species noted. Number 9, any site lighting must be motion activated and downward directed to minimize light pollution. Any addition or modification of lighting will require an amendment to the use by special review prior to installation of the lighting. Number 10, the applicant must construct a perimeter fence at least 6 feet high with round cap posts for wildlife safety, plus the addition of 2 strands of top wire at least 6 inches apart for a total of fence height of at least 7 feet. The bottom top wire can be barbed, but the top wire shall be smooth. The bottom of the fence shall also be 4 inches or less from the ground. Number 11, the applicant shall limit the number of tributary and gulch crossings during construction. Where unavoidable, the applicant shall cross the drainages in a perpendicular direction. Number 12, the applicant or subsequent owner must notify the county if the use is discontinued or if the solar power plant does not move forward within 2 years of signature of the approved USR. Number 13, the applicant shall work with mineral rights owners to ensure that minerals underlying the project are accessible. Number 14, the applicant shall meet all of the requirements stipulated by Xcel Energy Public Service Company. 15, the applicant's maintenance staff shall regularly, at least monthly, inspect this solar facility for birds and mammals. For each species of bird or mammal found dead on or at the facility, maintenance staff shall photograph it and keep a running mortality list of such birds and or mammals. This list will be submitted to CPW and Arapahoe County once a year for 3 years. The purpose of this list is to understand what specific species of wildlife may be negatively impacted by the solar facility, and to have a once a year at least conversation with CPW regarding corrective measures. If the maintenance staff finds injured birds and mammals on the site that may be candidates for rehabilitation, They will notify the CPW Denver office at 303-291-7227 during the week or CSP on the weekend to locate an on-call wildlife officer. And finally, number 16. The applicant shall provide a wildlife corridor approximately greater than 200 feet wide that will allow wildlife to continue to move through the main ephemeral drainage at the solar facility. The solar facility shall be fenced to keep wildlife out of it. The final design will be submitted to CPW for review upon completion of a site survey and the final project layout design by the applicant.
And I'm going to second that motion. Are there any discussion or questions or concerns? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, that motion passes unanimously. Congratulations. Are there any commissioner comments this morning? Seeing none, our meeting is adjourned.